Long ago, in the vast and fertile lands of the Indian subcontinent, a new story was about to begin. The air was thick with change. Small kingdoms like fireflies in the night dotted the landscape. They fought and allied, rose and fell. But something monumental was stirring. This was a time of great thinkers and ambitious leaders. In the east, the powerful Nanda dynasty held sway, their wealth legendary, their armies feared. To the west, a shadow was stretching from Europe. The armies of Alexander the Great had arrived at India's doorstep, a force unlike any seen before. The world was in motion, and India was at a crossroads. Its destiny was waiting to be forged. The arrival of Alexander and his Macedonian phalanx sent ripples across the land. Though he did not conquer the heart of India, his presence was a catalyst. It was in this crucible of uncertainty and opportunity that the seeds of a great empire were sown. The stage was set for a new player. The hero of this new chapter was a young man named Chandragupta Maurya. His exact beginnings are shrouded in mystery, a detail that only adds to his legend. This mentor was Chanakya, a wise and cunning scholar. Chanakya had been insulted by the arrogant Nanda king and swore an oath of vengeance. He saw in the young Chandragupta the perfect instrument for his ambition, a leader with the courage and charisma to unite the people and build a new empire from the ashes of the old. Together, they were a formidable pair. Chanakya provided the mind, a master of statecraft and strategy, whose teachings would be recorded in the famous book, the Arthashastra. They started small, gathering a loyal army of mercenaries and local warriors who were unhappy with Nanda rule. They moved with purpose, first securing the northwestern frontier regions that had been destabilized by Alexander's brief invasion. Their campaign was not simply a series of battles. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare and political maneuvering. Chandragupta marched his army towards the magnificent capital city of Pataliputra, the heart of Nanda power. The ensuing battle was fierce, a clash of titans that would decide the fate of the subcontinent. The Nanda king was overthrown, and Chandragupta Maurya, the young man from nowhere, ascended the throne. In 322 BCE, a new dynasty was born. With Chandragupta as its emperor, the Maurya Empire began to take shape, and it was a creation of breathtaking scale and complexity. It was not just a collection of conquered lands, it was a highly organized, centrally governed state, the first of its kind in India. The emperor was the supreme authority, the heart of the entire system, but he did not rule alone. A council of ministers, hand-picked for their wisdom and skill, advised him. A vast and sophisticated bureaucracy, a network of officials and clerks, carried out the emperor's commands, reaching into every corner of the sprawling realm. The empire was divided into provinces, each managed by a governor, often a prince or a trusted general. These provinces were further divided into districts and then into villages, creating a clear chain of command from the emperor down to the smallest community. This structure allowed for efficient administration and tax collection, which was the lifeblood of the empire. Taxes were levied on everything from farmland and cattle to goods sold in the marketplace. This wealth funded the empire's most crucial asset, its enormous army. Numbering in the hundreds of thousands with infantry, cavalry, and fearsome war elephants, it was the ultimate guarantor of Mauryan power. Society under the Mauryas was a diverse mosaic of peoples, languages, and beliefs, all held together by this powerful administrative frame. Farmers worked the land, their harvests feeding the cities and the army. Artisans and craftsmen in the towns produced exquisite goods, textiles, pottery, and metalwork. Merchants and traders formed the arteries of the economy, their caravans and ships carrying goods along well-maintained roads and sea routes. One of the most remarkable features of the empire was its intelligence network. An army of spies and informants, described in detail by Chanakya, kept the emperor aware of everything that happened in his domain. This system of espionage was the empire's nervous system, allowing the emperor to react swiftly to any threat, internal or external. At the heart of this vast empire were its magnificent cities. They were the centers of power, commerce, and culture, drawing people from all corners of the subcontinent. The grandest of them all was the capital, Pataliputra, located on the fertile banks of the river Ganga. Ancient Greek visitors like the ambassador Megasthenes wrote about it with awe. He described a city stretching for miles, protected by a massive wooden wall with 570 towers and 64 gates. Inside these walls, life was vibrant and organized. The streets were laid out in a grid, broad and well-maintained. The emperor's palace was said to be a wonder of timber and stone. Other great cities like Taxila in the northwest and Ujjain in the west served as vital provincial capitals and centers of learning and trade. Taxila, an ancient seat of knowledge, was a crossroads of cultures where Indian, Persian, and Greek ideas met and mingled. Ujjain was a crucial hub on the trade routes that connected the northern plains with the ports on the western coast, a bustling center of commerce where goods from across the known world were exchanged. These cities were not just administrative centers, they were melting pots. People from different regions speaking different languages and practicing different faiths lived and worked side by side. The Maurya Empire reached its zenith under its third ruler, the grandson of Chandragupta. His name was Ashoka. In his early years as emperor, he was much like his predecessors, ambitious, ruthless, and determined to expand the empire to its natural boundaries. He was known as Chandrashoka, or Ashoka the Fierce, a ruler who did not shy away from war to achieve his goals. He strengthened the central administration and continued the policies that had made the empire so powerful. The defining moment of his reign, and one of the most significant turning points in Indian history, came with the Kalinga War. Kalinga, a prosperous kingdom on the eastern coast, was one of the last independent realms that stood outside Mauryan control. Ashoka launched a massive invasion to conquer it. The people of Kalinga fought with incredible bravery, but they were ultimately overwhelmed by the might of the Mauryan army. The victory was absolute, but the cost was horrific. The battlefield was a scene of unimaginable carnage. According to his own inscriptions, the sight of this devastation changed Ashoka forever. He was filled with profound remorse and disgust at the suffering he had caused. Over 100,000 people were killed in the fighting, and even more were captured and deported. This personal crisis led him to a spiritual awakening. He sought a new way to rule, a new philosophy to guide his life and his empire. He found his answer in the gentle teachings of the Buddha. Ashoka, the fierce warrior, transformed into Dharmashoka, Ashoka the righteous. He renounced aggressive warfare as an instrument of state policy. Instead of conquest by the sword, he now sought conquest by Dharma, a moral and ethical code of conduct. Ashoka's conversion was not just a private change of faith, it became the new policy of the entire empire. He was determined to spread his message of Dharma to all his subjects. To do this, he used a remarkable method. He had his edicts, his new principles of rule, carved into stone pillars and rock faces throughout the empire. These inscriptions were placed along trade routes and in busy cities, in multiple languages, so that everyone could read or hear them. They were public declarations of his new path, a permanent record of his promise to rule with compassion and righteousness. These edicts were not religious dogma, but a practical, ethical guide for life. They encouraged people to be kind to one another, to respect their elders, and to show tolerance for all beliefs. They promoted non-violence towards all living beings, including animals. Ashoka banned ritual animal sacrifices at the capital and established hospitals for both people and animals. He had wells dug and shade trees planted along roads to make travel easier for merchants and pilgrims. He saw himself as a father to his people, and his policies reflected this newfound sense of paternal responsibility. The emperor also took an active role in spreading the message of Buddhism beyond the borders of India. He sent missionaries, including his own son and daughter, to distant lands like Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, and even to the Greek kingdoms in the West. These missions were peaceful. Their goal was not to conquer, but to share a philosophy of peace and compassion. It was through Ashoka's patronage that Buddhism, which had been a relatively small Indian sect, began its journey to becoming a major world religion. He transformed it from a local faith into a global movement. This great transformation created a unique period of peace and prosperity. While he personally embraced Buddhism, Ashoka never forced his faith on others. His edicts explicitly call for tolerance and respect for all religions, including Brahmanism and Jainism. His rule was a grand experiment in creating a multi-ethnic, multi-religious state bound not by fear, but by a shared moral purpose. For the ordinary person, life in the Maurya Empire was one of stability and structure. The vast majority of the population lived in rural villages, their lives governed by the seasons. They were farmers, the backbone of the empire. They cultivated wheat, barley, and rice, and paid a portion of their harvest to the state as tax. In return, the empire provided security from bandits and foreign invaders. The state also invested in large-scale irrigation projects, building canals and reservoirs to ensure a reliable water supply for the crops. This agricultural surplus was the foundation of the empire's wealth and power. In the bustling towns and cities, a different kind of life unfolded. Here, society was more complex and stratified. Craftsmen, organized into guilds, produced a stunning array of goods. Weavers created fine cotton and silk textiles. Potters shaped elegant earthenware, and metalsmiths forged tools, weapons, and beautiful jewelry. Merchants and traders were a prosperous class, their activities protected and regulated by the state. A standardized system of currency, with silver and copper coins bearing imperial symbols, made trade easier and more efficient across the vast distances of the empire. Daily life was rich with culture and tradition. Religion was woven into the fabric of society. People worshipped a variety of gods and goddesses and followed different philosophical paths. From the orthodox rituals of the Brahmins to the ascetic practices of Jains and Buddhists. Festivals, processions, and pilgrimages were common, bringing communities together in shared celebration. Storytellers and traveling performers entertained audiences with tales from great epics like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. It was a world where ancient traditions coexisted with the new ideas promoted by the state. The Mauryan state was a constant presence in people's lives. Officials oversaw everything from the collection of taxes and the administration of justice to the maintenance of roads and the regulation of markets. A system of laws based on the principles of Dharma governed society, and courts were established to settle disputes. While this level of control might seem intrusive, it also brought a level of peace and order that had been unknown in the fragmented, war-torn centuries before. The Maurya Empire did not last forever, but its impact on India and the world is permanent. Its most immediate legacy was political. For the first time, the vast majority of the Indian subcontinent was united under a single central authority. The Mauryas created the very idea of a unified India, a concept that would inspire future emperors and nationalists for millennia to come. They provided a blueprint for empire building with a sophisticated administrative and bureaucratic structure that would be copied and adapted by later dynasties. The Mauryan achievement set the standard for what a pan-Indian empire could be. The empire's economic legacy was equally profound. The Mauryas built a remarkable infrastructure of roads, including the famous Uttara Path, or Northern Road, which stretched for over 1,000 miles from the northwest frontier to the Gangetic Delta. This network, along with a common currency and secure trade routes, stimulated commerce on an unprecedented scale. Indian goods reached markets in Persia, the Greek world, and Southeast Asia. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Maurya Empire is cultural and spiritual, and that is largely due to Ashoka. His patronage of Buddhism was a pivotal moment in the history of world religions. Without his support, Buddhism might have remained a minor Indian philosophy. Instead, his missionaries carried its message of peace across Asia, where it took root and flourished, shaping the cultures of countless nations. His personal philosophy of Dharma, of ruling with compassion and moral responsibility, introduced a new ideal of kingship. The idea that a ruler's duty is the welfare of their people is a powerful concept that remains relevant today. The symbols of the empire are still with us. The Ashoka chakra, the 24-spoked wheel that adorned his pillars, is now at the center of India's national flag, representing the eternal wheel of law and righteousness. The lion capital of Ashoka, a magnificent sculpture of 4 lions standing back to back, was adopted as the official emblem of modern India after its independence. These are not just historical artifacts, they are living symbols of the ideals the Maurya Empire, at its best, stood for: unity, strength, peace, and justice. The long shadow of the Mauryas still falls across the subcontinent they first united. Every great empire, no matter how mighty, eventually faces its twilight. The Maurya Empire was no exception. After the death of the great Ashoka, the decline began. His successors lacked his vision, his charisma, and his administrative skill. The vast empire, held together for so long by a powerful center, began to show cracks. The rulers who followed Ashoka struggled to manage the enormous bureaucracy and command the loyalty of the far-flung provinces. The bonds that had united the diverse regions of the empire started to weaken without a strong hand at the helm. There were several reasons for this decline. The immense cost of maintaining a large standing army and a vast bureaucracy put a severe strain on the imperial treasury. Some historians argue that Ashoka's policies of non-violence may have weakened the military spirit of the empire, making it vulnerable to threats. As central authority faded, ambitious provincial governors began to assert their independence, breaking away to form their own kingdoms. The unity that had been the empire's greatest strength began to unravel. Invasions from the northwest also played a part. New waves of invaders, including Bactrian Greeks, began to press on the empire's frontiers. The weakened Mauryan state struggled to repel these incursions, losing control of valuable territories. Internally, there may have been a backlash against the Mauryan policies. Some theories suggest that Brahminical groups, who may have lost influence and income due to Ashoka's ban on animal sacrifices and his patronage of Buddhism, supported a change in leadership. The complex web of social and political forces that had sustained the empire was coming apart. The end came about 50 years after Ashoka's death, around 185 BCE. The last Mauryan emperor, Brihadratha, was assassinated by his own commander-in-chief, a Brahmin general named Pushyamitra Shunga. He was killed in full view of his army during a military parade, a dramatic and brutal end to a once glorious dynasty. Pushyamitra established the Shunga dynasty in its place, and the great Maurya Empire, which had united India and changed the course of its history, was no more. Yet its story does not truly end there. It lives on in the land, in its symbols, and in the timeless ideal of a united, peaceful, and just society that it once made a reality.